Opening scene. Robert Plant is one of the most legendary rock singers in history. His voice was part of the epic success of Led Zeppelin, bringing classic songs like Stairway to Heaven, Black Dog and Kashmir to life, and everyone on the planet, regardless of musical taste or age, has a shiver of recognition when they hear that opening wail on the Immigrant Song. More than just a voice, Plant was an iconic frontman. Tall and thin, usually shirtless, and rocking a mane of unkempt blonde curls, his physical presence on stage with the band was a powerful force. Plant is up there with Mick Jagger, Freddie Mercury, and other legendary rock lead singers, and he has been uniquely successful as a solo artist after Led Zeppelin broke up, constantly reinventing himself and diving into new genres without losing that iconic howl. But Plant's life hasn't been all hit records and world tours. In fact, if all you know about him is that he was in the biggest band in the world in the 1970s, then you might be surprised to hear the tragic real-life story of Robert Plant. Left home at 17. Robert Plant was born in Staffordshire, England, and grew up in a comfortably middle-class house. His father was an engineer, and his parents pushed him to become an accountant. But Plant had discovered blues music, and he was having trouble pretending to care about his education. As he told The Guardian back in 1970, it was really hard to combine the two and keep a compatible relationship with schoolmasters and parents, at the same time as doing what I really wanted to do. Plant left school at the age of 17 to pursue his music dreams, which upset his parents. As he puts it, "I got in with this crew, which I'm afraid upset my parents a bit, and the cleft between Mum and Dad and Robert got a bit wider and a bit wider." Luckily for Plant, he managed to make a huge success out of skipping out on that accounting degree, and he managed to patch things up with his parents. As he told Louder, "I had my moment of professional potential, and because I didn't accept it, I had to leave home when I was 17, so I toughened up pretty quickly. I made my peace with my parents a couple of years later, but it was good. It was what it should be." Was actually Jimmy Page's second choice. Although Robert Plant was Led Zeppelin's lead singer, he wasn't the chief executive of the band that was Jimmy Page. 4 years older than Plant, Page was already a seasoned professional musician when he formed the band in 1968. Page also had a reputation for being a hard-nosed businessman, so it's not really a surprise that he took the search for a lead singer very seriously. And Robert Plant was a relatively unknown and untested vocalist at the time. Terry Reid, on the other hand, was an established rock singer and songwriter, while Reid isn't super famous today. Observer reports that back in 1969, Aretha Franklin said there are only 3 things happening in England. When Page began putting together the band that would become Led Zeppelin, he invited Reid to be the lead. But Reid had already committed to being the opening act on several tours. He suggested that if Page could wait a few weeks, they could talk. But Page didn't want to wait. Reid actually recommended Plant to Page, and the rest, as they say, is history. According to Reid, there are no regrets or hard feelings. He says his musical interest was diverging from rock music, and he wasn't into what he calls hard rock anymore. Was in a terrible car crash and lost his memory. In 1970, life for Robert Plant was pretty good. He was in a band, Led Zeppelin, that had become enormously successful. He was newly married to Maureen Wilson and had a baby daughter, Carmen. They all lived happily on a farm in rural England with their pet dog and some goats. But the legendary rock singer was about to have the first of 2 horrific experiences with near-fatal automobile accidents. As the Irish Times reports, when Plant was testifying in the copyright infringement trial over the song Stairway to Heaven, he was told he'd attended a Spirit concert and even played snooker with one of Spirit's members. But Plant maintains that it's impossible. He stole any aspects of Spirit's song because he doesn't remember any of it. Plant testified that he couldn't remember either of those events because he'd been involved in a terrible car crash immediately afterward. He told the court that Maureen suffered a fractured skull, and that part of the windshield buried in the top of my head. He claimed that as a result, he didn't remember anything about the earlier events. Was in a second bad car crash. In 1975, Led Zeppelin were poised to start a new tour and a new album as the biggest band in the world. They'd just come off a huge tour that had earned them huge money, and they had every intention of keeping that momentum going. And then, as Louder reports, Plant was in the passenger seat of a rented car on the island of Rhodes. His wife Maureen was driving and their children Karak and Carmen were in the back seat with a friend. Then the car skidded off the road, sailed over a ledge and landed in a tree. Plant shattered his right leg in several places. Maureen was unconscious and bleeding, and the children were also injured. It took hours for help to arrive, and when Plant finally came out of the hospital, he was in a wheelchair. Karak had a broken leg and Maureen had a fractured skull. It was a miracle that they all survived. A tour was out of the question, of course. The band rallied to record their 1976 album Presence, but Plant had to lay down his vocals from a wheelchair and understandably battled depression, which is reflected in the album's dark lyrics. Got divorced and never married again. Robert Plant married Maureen Wilson in 1968, just as Led Zeppelin was taking off. They met in 1966, and according to Rocks Off magazine, Plant has acknowledged that Maureen supported them with her nursing work when he was a struggling, unknown musician. Plant obviously loved her very much, according to Rolling Stone. He dedicated the song Thank You on Led Zeppelin II to Maureen. A sweet declaration of love and commitment. Maureen accompanied Plant on the first Led Zeppelin tour, but shortly after the birth of their first child, Carmen, she began staying home with the kids while Plant toured. Plant has admitted that while he tried to be a good father and husband, he was distracted. I'd spent so much time trying to be a decent dad, but at the same time, I was really attracted to what I was doing in Zeppelin. Then, in 1977, tragedy struck when Karak, just 5 years old, died suddenly of a stomach virus. Plant was so devastated that he considered quitting his music career. The couple carried on, having their son Logan in 1979, but the tragedy and Plant's career took its toll. In 1983, the couple divorced. Plant has never remarried. Was told he'd never sing again. A singer's voice is everything, their living and their identity. Robert Plant has one of the most famous voices in rock music, so anything that threatens that voice is a tragic reminder of life's fragility. Like many artists, Plant has been his own harshest critic, and he had to have surgery in the early 1970s to remove nodules from his vocal cords, a fairly common procedure that many singers have had to endure. The procedure can sometimes end a singing career, and Led Zeppelin fans debate whether the surgery caused a change in his vocals, but it's fair to say that Plant managed to carry on with his singing career after that. So it was a shock when the iconic singer went to a doctor in the early 1990s and was told that he would lose his voice within a few months, and he probably wouldn't even be able to speak, much less sing. The number of times you think you've had it, you think it's gone, there's a certain number of singers who were so hard on themselves, it's lost forever.